I have a fairly mellow Discord if you want to join us there for a bit of conversation and debate. We have people from all over, really, and for the most part, it's fairly good-natured and peaceful. As long as you come in that kind of spirit, you'll be fine. The 1970s. It wasn't all shag carpeting and A-line flares with pockets in the knees. It was a period of great social and political upheaval and progress. It was a time of great hardship with things like the winter of discontent and the oil crisis, but it was also a period of great optimism and technological progress, as well as social and political progress. The space race was still ongoing, Skylab was still in operation, the Apollo missions were still ongoing at the start of the 70s, and the space shuttle would launch by the end of the 70s. Britain had a popular left-wing government for a while under Harold Wilson. The oil crisis came to an end in the 70s. The environmentalist movement in India became prominent with the Chipko movement, and sustainability and ecological issues began to climb in people's priorities around the world, even resulting in a sitcom in the UK called The Good Life. In Portugal, the Carnation Revolution restored democracy to that country, and in Greece, the military junta in power began to fall. Nixon resigned. But despite being fucking Nixon, a benchmark for evil in the American government until Trump came along and Bush before him, despite being Nixon, his era saw détente with the USSR, more open relations with China, and various other feats of international diplomacy that moved things forward. Far left groups were very much in the public consciousness, and there were a lot of them, and they were doing a lot of things, most of them bad, but still it was high in the public consciousness, with groups like the Japanese Red Army or the Baader-Meinhof gang in the news. The PLO were granted observer status at the United Nations. In an act of uncharacteristic optimism, humanity beamed the Arecibo message at the stars in hopes of contacting extraterrestrials before realising that may possibly be a bad idea. Decolonisation was accelerating around the world, particularly in Africa, and South Africa was becoming a pariah state around the world because of their apartheid laws. Feminism took off, the more pragmatic older wing of feminism, where it was about real material things, and women began to play ever more important roles in public life. Not necessarily in the best way when it came to people like Margaret Thatcher, but I guess showing that you can be as repressive, conservative, regressive, mean-spirited and nasty as the boys is progress of a sort, I guess. These were the years of the CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and of the Vietnam protests, anti-war protests in general, of the sexual revolution, of youth suffrage in the United States, of disco music, of Atari and prog rock. And in 1974, 1 year older than me, Dungeons and Dragons. And where did D&D first take off? D&D first gained massive popularity amongst the student population. And in the universities, it integrated with nascent tech culture. Programming of Rogue, I think, was the late 70s, of leftover hippie culture, pot smoking, LSD, fantasy and SF reading groups and clubs, Star Trek fandom. That is where you found your gamers. Amongst the hippies and the radicals, the people that would go on to be the foundation of the information society in which we find ourselves. Of San Francisco, Google, Apple. So I want you to think about the culture of that time. I want you to really think about the nature of students since forever. How students always are radical, progressive, revolutionary, countercultural. And then I want you to really think if conservative is the right descriptor to use to describe students, and therefore to describe the majority of the people who formed the early D&D societies, groups, clubs, and so on. Do you really think conservative is how the majority of typical OG gamers were? Or were they passed out in their dorm room, high as fuck, listening to Yes and staring at some kind of psychedelic poster with a mushroom on it? The OSR isn't conservative, it's just old, and as such a lot of people in the OSR, or older gamers as a whole, just have a different set of progressive values for the most part. The demographic is still radical, progressive, revolutionary, just as the people today see themselves that way, I'm sure. It's just a different set of progressive values. It's more sex positive. It's more willing to separate art from artist. It's ferociously anti-bullying due to our own trauma from our past. Our nasty childhoods and adolescences. The gauntlet that we ran. It's ferociously pro-free speech, and that used to be very much a left-wing value. The Berkeley free speech movement, for example. The Oz trial. All of these things, these are important to us. We went through the satanic panic, video nasties, all the rest of it. And it's a progressive value to us to be pro-free expression, even for things we don't like, don't appreciate, don't want. The discourse is more important. And games can bring people together. They can help you humanize each other. You sit across the table from someone with different values than you, but you come together in a game, you both play, you both enjoy it, you see each other as human. And then the things that divide you don't seem necessarily so bad or so insurmountable. You can talk, you can discuss, you have common ground somewhere. All these culture wars have turned that wonderful thing that can bring people together in a common pastime. They've turned it into just another battleground. Excuse me, but I'm not doing another take. I've been having audio problems. Yeah, you've taken that and you've turned it into just another battleground where people are at each other all the time. You're labeling people incorrectly. And for all the moronic so-called progressive takes you find on one side, you'll find moronic conservative, so-called conservative takes on the other, because there is money in the conflict, which is the grand problem of the internet and social media, I guess. Conflict is what draws eyes, but you're just making things worse by doing this. You're turning what should bring people together and allow them to humanize each other to just another thing to want to kill each other over. That's desperately counterproductive. Games can bring us together. They can help us see each other as human. If you recognize that both sides of the argument are progressive in their own way, then maybe we can get somewhere. It's an analogy that's a little bit tortured and a little bit over-egging the pudding, but I'm going to use it anyway. You can view this similarly to the way things are around the trans debate, right? One group are archly feminist, and feminism is usually seen as being a progressive movement, something necessary, something that has and continues to move forward, rights for women towards equality. At least this is what it's seen as, what it's marketed as, all the rest of it. On the other side, you have LGBT acceptance and so on that is now concentrating more on the T. We see advances for the rights and freedoms of trans people. Both of these groups see themselves as progressive. Both of these groups are progressive, but they have two differing sets of progressive values that clash with one another. And so one group is being targeted and labelled as conservative, progressive, whatever else, and they apply the same criticism to the other. But if both of them can see each other as human, and if both of them can come together somehow and see the goodwill and the righteousness of each other's causes, shall we say, then maybe there might be some sort of progress or compromise or discussion, or at the very least humanization of each other around some commonality. But these fights, they are desperately counterproductive, and I wish you could see it the same way that I do. I mean, I guess I contribute sometimes to the fight, but what I'm trying to do is to nudge people's conscience and make them see that the people on the other side are are human, or perhaps that the things they're fighting for aren't as progressive as they think they are. But gamers, they're not evil. Gaming has always been progressive. Gaming has always been inclusive. Pretending it isn't is wildly insulting to huge swathes of people, and it's no wonder they get upset. Saying. It's been called misogynistic, racist, a hate group, reactionary. It's been blamed for Trump, for keeping women out of games and technology. None of this is true. If you want the real story, then you need to buy Inside Gamergate.